several countries, including parts of Nigeria, 12 states, have these blasphemy laws that are just horrific, and they use them against many times innocent people just by making accusations, and then mobs kill or burn them, and it's just horrific.
Outstanding is a production of The Washington Stand, your source for news and commentary from a biblical worldview.
Welcome to the Outstanding Podcast. On this show, we dive into culture, politics, and news from a biblical perspective. I'm your host, Casey Harper. Today, we're talking about an important topic: persecution of the church around the world. Not just the church is being persecuted, by the way. A lot of religious groups are, but you may think that persecution is a relic of the ancient world, maybe something reserved for the book of Acts, but you'd be wrong. In fact, it may be worse now than it's ever been. Well, here to explain, I have two great guests. Arielle del Turco, she's director of the Center for Religious Liberty at the Family Research Council. And we have a special guest as well, Vicky Hartzler, chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, former congresswoman for the 4th District of Missouri. Thank you guys both for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Chair Hartzler, I want to start with you. We have a lot to dive in on this. We're going to tell stories of what's happening, dive into different countries, explain the nuances. But first, this is not an expertise area for me. And as just a regular American who's focused on domestic politics, excited about some of the things that are happening domestically, a believer, I care about the church, but I'm not following all the news. I can barely keep up with our news here. It's a little startling to me when I do see some of these news stories come across about a bunch of Christians being killed in Nigeria or something happening in Syria. And it's hard to put that in the context of what's happening around the world. So I'll start with you, Chair. Is persecution really happening around the world? How bad is it? And are we doing anything to stop it?
Well, it is very prevalent, unfortunately. And I, like many Americans, really wasn't focused on this for many years and thought persecution was really something that happened in the past. And then I started reading more and seeing some of these stories. And now I know that 1 in 9 Christians around the world, about 300 million of our brothers and sisters, are being persecuted in some ways. And in fact, last year, there was almost 4,500 Christians that were put to death around the world. And so not only are Christians being imprisoned, tortured, raped, having their churches burned and their houses destroyed, but there are those who are losing their lives on behalf of their faith. And we are called as Christians to stand with them. Hebrews 13:3 says, remember those in prison as if you were their fellow prisoner, and those that are mistreated as if you were suffering. And so it's something that we are told we should be doing, and we can play a very important role in helping them, certainly through prayer, but also through advocating for them through the government, through our policies. And that's what partially we are doing through the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. And I feel very privileged to be able to chair that at this time.
Wow. I mean, those numbers you threw out are pretty amazing. The thousands of Christians being killed in prison. And just to be really clear and put a point on it, they're not just being, killed because of a civil war or some generic violence. They're being targeted and persecuted because they're Christians and they won't deny their faith. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. And we all often think, well, what would happen if that was us? If we had a sword put to our throat and said, look, renounce your faith or else we're going to kill you, or we're going to kill your spouse or your children in front of your eyes. And we all hope that we would stand strong, but we need to pray for those who are facing those every day and draw encouragement and inspiration from their stories to stiffen our own spines, to be more bold in our faith here. We think we've had a bad day if somebody criticizes us on social media because of our beliefs, right. and yet we're not risking it all like they are, and we need to stand with them.
So I want to bring you in, Arielle. Is that your sense as well, the severity of these problems? I mean, the stats are undeniable, but you work on this issue. It's an area of expertise for you. How bad is it?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's clearly bad enough that FRC hired me in 2019 to work on it full time. Yeah. So this is a problem. But yeah, we've been focused on several hotspot areas around the world. We've been focused on China and Nigeria, where Christians are being imprisoned in China. Missionaries are being kicked out. Even this year, things seem to be getting tighter and tighter and more restrictive in that country. And in Nigeria, just on June 13th of this year, we saw a massive slaughter where people raided a Christian village in Nigeria. Militants shouting Allahu Akbar came in on motorcycles, killed around 200 Christians. So this is something that's happening this year in 2025. It's not just in the past. And it's so sad that we don't hear about it more in the headlines. But like Vicky said, we have a biblical mandate to be remembering our brothers and sisters who are in prison for Christ and be praying for these people.
Yeah, I want to pray for them too. There's been a lot said recently about thoughts and prayers versus policy, of course, with this transgender shooter, and a lot of people mocking prayer. And of course, we don't do that. Prayer is really important. I think the point that the left is trying to make is, there's policy too, not just prayer. Yeah. Some of them are making a really sinister point, which is prayer is worthy of mocking. But I think there's some they're trying to channel an inner frustration with the policy. And so when it comes to the policy, I'm curious, I guess we'll start with you, Vicky, on what we're doing, because the perception, as someone who's more focused on domestic issues, is that, we're doing tariffs around the world. We're involved in different conflicts. We send money to a lot of people. Of course, we just dismantled USAID, but we've been sending money to people all around the world. We're very heavily involved in every continent. But what are we doing on this issue? Is this something that the federal government is prioritizing? And what does it look like very practically in somewhere like this happens in Nigeria? I mean, in one sense, what can we do? But we must be doing something. So what are the practical steps that we can do and that are being done to address this problem?
Well, almost 28 years ago, Congress passed a very important, unique pieces of legislation that is called the International Religious Freedom Act. And it sets up a policy saying that religious freedom should be equal in our foreign policy with national security and with economic issues. And so when our Secretary of State and our diplomats go in and visit with the government, they should be having these discussions. So say, hey, you want some F-16s, we want to partner with you. But hey, there are some pastors that are in prison right now that you have in prison, and this violates the treaty you have signed and the international standards for religious freedom. And this is important to us as America as well. So let's talk about maybe you could release these prisoners and then we can get you the F-16s. This should be the discussion. Now that we are having all these tariff discussions with countries around the world, that's an economic issue. There should be alongside it the discussion on religious freedom as well. And so Nigeria being the main hotspot right now we're focusing on, where 69% of the Christians were killed last year. Of those 4,500, 69% were in Nigeria. The discussion should be, look, we want to help you come alongside you, Nigeria government, but you are being complicit in this, then that you are not stopping this violence that's coming from radical Islamic Fulani herders and others in the area. We will work with you, but you have got to do more to stop this, and you need to be more responsive when people call for help. You need to ensure your military is there, and then our military aid or our economic assistance will be contingent on how you respond and how you're able to protect your people. It should be a linkage between our help, our assistance, and their changes that they make to ensure more religious freedom. That's practically how it works. Now, our commission makes recommendations. Our mandate is to monitor all the religious freedom abuses around the world, and we produce a report that goes to Congress and the President and the Secretary of State, making recommendations on which countries should be called the countries of particular concern, that is the worst category, and which countries are still bad, have severe restrictions, and maybe they should be a special watch list. If the President goes through and makes those designations, there is a list in the law of consequences that the president can choose from to impose on that country, to encourage them and to make changes. And so that is what our role is. And then it's up to the president what they do. Practically, those things are withholding military aid, withholding foreign aid, or conditioning that on changes to their law or release of prisoners from prison, or putting sanctions, visa restrictions, withholding diplomatic visits. I mean, there's a bunch of different options there, but the law triggers these as the president follows through on our recommendations. And so we're calling on the Trump administration now to look at our report that we issued in the spring and to follow through and make some of those recommendations, which we expect and should be due any day from the State Department. Okay,
so it sounds like imminently there could be some changes, and we're waiting. I mean, as early as today, President Trump could do something. It seems to me like there's been mission drift, because when I think of the Biden administration, my perception, and you guys know more about this than I do, so please correct me. My perception is the Biden administration is using these same tools that you laid out to actually pressure people on the LGBT agenda and say, pressure them to pass certain laws from transgenderism or anything on the whole spectrum of LGBT. And it seems really difficult to be pushing that and religious liberty. So is that accurate? When I look at the spending of the State Department and the budget requests that they were sending to the president for just sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars to advance, equity, and as they define equity, was not just women's literacy. Okay. It was not just that. It was a whole range of LGBT issues. So has there been mission drift at places like the State Department under Biden? And if so, do we feel like that's been corrected? First you, Vicky, and I want to hear from you, Arielle.
Mm-hmm. Well, there certainly was. We're finding out lots of money and lots of focus on those issues. As I looked through last year's report, though, the Biden administration did do some advocacy for religious freedom as well. They helped get some 125 prisoners released in Nicaragua, helped negotiate that. They did impose some visa restrictions, some sanctions on individuals from Burma and Russia and Iran who were complicit in religious freedom violations. And their ambassador for religious freedom did travel and make some push for that. But now we have the Trump administration, and we have an opportunity to do even more, and certainly to forego misspending on those other things, but focus on religious freedom. And as we said, as they're right now in negotiations dealing with tariffs and things, there should be this focus on what changes could be made to strengthen their religious freedom in their country alongside their national security and their economics. And I'm encouraged that 4 years ago under the Trump administration and at then Secretary Mike Pompeo, he issued an executive order that ordered every embassy in the world to develop a plan on how we, through the United States diplomacy, could help advance religious freedom in that country, and said this will be a focus for every discussion, every negotiation. And I'm hopeful that this administration, Trump, will continue that, and under Secretary Rubio, who was such a champion for religious freedom in the Senate, that he will rise up and be that champion again for us during this administration.
Yeah, I'll just add a little more color to the question you gave, Casey. So the chairwoman laid out a really good set of the mechanisms that were created under the International Religious Freedom Act. So really the U.S. government has an embarrassment of riches of opportunities to work specifically on international religious freedom. And in those mechanisms and in those categories, we really haven't seen that much LGBT mission drift. We've seen that more in other areas of the State Department. The challenge we see in all of these presidential administrations is really just, are they going to use these mechanisms to the fullest ability for the sake of the persecuted?
So when you say embarrassment of riches, we have plenty of tools at our disposal.
So many tools, so many opportunities.
Just executing.
Yeah, are we going to execute?
Right.
And so the first Trump administration really set the bar for excellent execution on promoting international religious freedom abroad. Secretary Pompeo was very focused on this issue. We had an excellent international religious freedom ambassador in Sam Brownback. back, godly man, prayer warrior. He was just so excellent in elevating this issue. And now under the second Trump administration, obviously all of this was like kind of undone to some extent under Biden. They weren't pushing this as an issue as much. But under the second Trump administration, we have some room to grow and some momentum to gain back. We haven't even had our first international religious freedom ambassador confirmed. Mark Walker has been appointed.
The Senate, though.
The Senate needs to confirm him, yes.
And they're holding back judges, too. So they're holding things. The Democrats in the Senate are holding up a lot of those.
Yeah. So I do see areas for momentum in the future, and I'm really excited to see what the Trump administration is going to do. But yeah, I'm so excited to have you, Vicky, and as chair of USERF. I was curious if you wanted to expound on maybe one or two stories you've heard personally. I know you guys all get personal briefings from persecuted people who are really asking for our help as Americans. I was curious if you wanted to share one or two of those stories.
Well, sure. Just this past weekend, sadly, in Nigeria, a woman was attacked and burned to death who was accused of blasphemy. And she was just a street vendor, and a man propositioned her. And I guess her response, whatever somebody heard, whatever she said to him, and said, "Oh, she's blaspheming the prophet," and a mob ensued, attacked her, and set her on fire, and she burned to death. And several countries, including parts of Nigeria, 12 states, have these blasphemy laws that are just horrific, and they use them against many times innocent people. Just by making accusations, and then mobs kill or burn them. And it's just horrific. So that's a story that's just been on my heart this week, how awful that is and what's going on in Nigeria. But I also think of Pastor Wang Yi from China, who I adopted when I was a member of Congress under the Defending Freedoms Project, where members of Congress are encouraged to adopt people of faith and advocate for them. And he's the pastor of the Early Rain Covenant Church, who was an unregistered church and was very dynamic. He even was invited by President George W. Bush to come to the United States, met with him, just a very strong man of faith. And in 2018, the Chinese government raided his church, arrested him and 100 members of his congregation, and charged him with these unfounded charges, and then sentenced him to prison. And he is still there today. I believe I've heard his health is failing. And he issued a faithful disobedience statement, that is Declaration of Faithful Disobedience, that I would encourage readers to just Google and read. It is so profound, so inspiring, saying, I will stand for my faith no matter what. And that's what we should all be willing to do. And so those are just two of the recent stories that are still on my heart, and we need to advocate for them.
Wow. Those are sobering and profound, and put some of our domestic battles in perspective. I think, of course, I love what, Congresswoman said at the beginning about, we all have this picture of, if someone said, deny Jesus or die, would you do it? I think we've all kind of played that scenario in our head. Would I be brave enough to stand for Jesus? But we see another admonition in Scripture where Jesus says that if you don't visit those in prison, and if you don't care for the least of these, you didn't do it for him. And so there's also another test beyond what I personally stand for my faith. It's, well, I stand for those who have been imprisoned, which is what I think that you guys are working on here. Is it'd be really easy to forget these people. There's not going to be a front page story about some pastor in China or Nigeria or Syria, or pick your country where things are going on. It's easy to forget it, and people only cover it because they're getting pressure from people like both of you and others. And so I love that we're just tying it to that biblical connection to visiting those in prison has a broader implication. Those who are being persecuted, are we caring for them? Are we forgetting them? I want to get a little more specific on some of these countries with you guys in the time we have left. We've mentioned Nigeria. It seems like that's hopefully going to be designated a country of particular concern. It seems really important. I don't know how much worse it has to get for you to meet that metric, I mean, at this point. And then I think China is not really a surprise to people. That's a little bit of a tougher case, I would think, because how much leverage do we really have over China at this point? It's kind of more adversarial relationship. But there's other countries where we do have more leverage, or we've given it up. I think what comes to mind is Syria and Afghanistan. Chair Hartzler, I saw you talking recently about what's happened in Afghanistan and the Taliban, and you guys are being very nice to the Biden administration. I think you're being apolitical, and that's smart. I'm a little bit tougher on them, and maybe that's just my job. But there was a lot of support for leaving Afghanistan, and that's one issue. But the way they left, they handed it over to the Taliban on day one. It's not like they left and things were good, and over a year or two, there was a civil war and the Taliban won the war. No, it went from U.S. control to Taliban control in a matter of hours. And the fallout's not been good for women and religious, for Christians or any religious minorities. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. And I certainly decry and did before and continue to the horrific response of our government withdrawing from Afghanistan and what ensued. I mean, it was a disaster.
Yep.
And even at the time when I was in Congress, I called for the president to resign as a result. But yes, it's what has happened since. It's just been horrific. And I did travel to Afghanistan as a member of the Armed Services Committee when I was in Congress. And I met with several of the women leaders there. And they said, please don't ever leave or leave totally, because we are on a hit list and we'll be dead within hours if you do. And I've often wondered what happened to them, because now the laws, as you say, the Taliban prohibit women from leaving their house, and they have to be accompanied by a man, and they have to be totally covered in burqas, and they have absolutely no freedom at all. And there is no religious freedom there unless you believe in the Taliban's version of Islam. And it is a scary, sad, horrific, oppressive regime now. And if there are Christians left there, which I think there are some, they have to totally be in secret. And it's just heartbreaking what's happened. And we need to, as America, continue to allow these refugees to come in. That's a policy decision the administration can make, who are fleeing for religious reasons or who helped our American soldiers while they were there. I think there's still some refugee issues where perhaps we can grant asylum to some of these individuals, but overall, it is a very bleak situation there.
Yeah, I mean, there's things we can do now, as you mentioned, to try to clean up the mess. And ideally, we wouldn't have made the mess. And then I know you spoke very clearly about that, about not making the mess in the first place, as we seem to have a pattern of doing lately. Arielle, what do you think about this? I want to also talk about Syria, so you can comment on Afghanistan or Syria. I know that Israel's front and center in this whole conversation too. Of course, they've been talking about persecution. I mean, October 7th is no secret. But then there's things going on with the Druze and how Israel's responding to them in Syria. I believe Christians are being killed in Syria as well, and maybe in the Southwest. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I might let the commissioner speak to Syria specifically, but just on Afghanistan, I'll add, we've been hearing a lot about the possible deportations of Afghan Christians from the U.S. who came over on special humanitarian visas after the Biden administration totally destroyed their country, and they clearly qualified for protection under the rules we were doing at the time. So these people face almost certain death if they return. If they return, they are known to be Christians. They had the protection of the United States. If they are returned, they face almost certain death. So we really need to be judicious in how we're carrying out some of these deportation policies. Even though I would certainly agree with them in general, we just need to be going on a case-by-case basis and being very careful in how we do this, because people's lives are at stake.
Well, I understand the deportation push right now, but is maybe we can work with other countries to find, it's not America or Afghanistan.
Yeah. So true.
So maybe there's other Arab nations even that would be more culturally similar or something, that people that would take them. Obviously, the Trump administration has been working with other countries to take deported prisoners. I don't know. That's a whole other topic. Do you want to speak to Syria, Chair Hartzler?
Sure. Well, during their recent civil war from 2011 to 2014, the Christians have fled the country, which is sad. Certainly in its own part, there's 1.5 million Christians now. They estimate about 300,000 Christians. And since the changeover in leadership, it's been kind of uncertain. I know the Christians are scared there. In June and July, there were 2 incidents where Christians were killed. And in June, a church was burned. And in July, there was a large sectarian violence in the South. And they think about 12 Christians were killed during that. And in March, there was an attack mainly against Alawites, but there was a few Christians caught up in that. So there hasn't been the mass killings there, but they're certainly fearful of whether the new leadership, al-Sharar, will be able to protect them from the foreign fighters, trained foreign fighters who are Islamic radicals who are in the country. There's about 15,000 of them. And so the future is uncertain for them. He used to be a terrorist himself and has said, well, I've left that and I'm going to provide a stable and free government. But I think we will have to wait and see on that. Now, the U.S. government did remove some of the sanctions and giving him the benefit of the doubt, giving him some room to try to formulate a stable and secure government. But like I said, we will have to see. But certainly the Christians there who are left are fearful and very concerned, and we should be in prayer for them.
Hmm. Yeah, Chairwoman, I wonder if we wanted to take a little bit of a step back. You obviously were in Congress. You're used to communicating with your constituents about often very tricky political issues that are very nuanced. Even just in my line of work, working at FRC on these topics, it can be tricky also to talk about international religious freedom and especially making it feel relevant to people in America. These topics can feel so abstract, so distant, so far removed from our daily lives. I wonder if you had thoughts on how you can, or how we all can be communicating better on these topics and what your approach is to communicating to Americans on international religious freedom issues.
Well, I think certainly just letting them know what's going on and then sharing a couple of those stories and just opening their eyes to it and their hearts and encouraging them to join with the brothers and sisters in Christ who someday will be before the throne worshiping him, to know that we stood beside them, but also draw inspiration from them and to learn from them what is going on in their countries, because we don't want that to happen here. And it can. We even now are seeing religious freedom vanishing from Europe. And Vice President Vance spoke against that at a Munich security conference earlier this year, and he called them out for their laws that are restricting that and making it illegal to pray in front of abortion clinics and arresting Christians for various religious freedom violations. And it can happen here. And we're very fortunate. We have a window of time and we're kind of on an island of religious freedom. But that's why I think President Trump formulated a commission for religious liberty here in the White House in America to try to push back and watch what's going on here within our own country to see that this doesn't happen. But we need to be vigilant and not be so cocky to think that, oh, it couldn't happen here, this doesn't matter. No, we need to be learning from them, seeing what their countries have done, and make sure it doesn't happen here, but then also stand with them and use the window of opportunity we have as the free beacon in the world to push back on the evils of religious oppression and persecution, and to help others achieve the same freedoms that we enjoy today.
Well, that's a really salient point. I saw that speech you're talking about with J.D. Vance. Elon Musk has also talked about related to this issue. There's I don't think he'll be canonized as a saint unless we have a road to Damascus experience. But people are starting to see that, hey, the persecution that we're familiar with hearing coming out of places like Syria is spreading to other countries and even to Europe. So it sounds like that's what you're saying. You're an authority to speak on this topic. You think Europe itself and even Western Europe, some of the places that were the birthplace of the ideas of religious liberty, are now at threat of losing that very protection?
Yes, they are. And even when I was a state representative, so this was from Missouri back in the 90s, but I got to meet, it was invited to meet a former member of the Muslim Brotherhood who was surrounded with high security, whose life is being threatened. He had to move every 5 days. But he was going around America trying to share the inner story of their plan of what they wanted to do. And he was focusing on Europe and said how the radical Muslims were planning to take over Europe without firing a shot through immigration and population, and to try to move as many people as possible there, to encourage them to have 6 to 8 kids. And just he had a very interesting graph there showing just the population trends and how over 10 years and 15 years and 20 years, how it will change the population and enable them to take over cities and through votes and cities and states and countries there, and set up Sharia law. And since then, I have kind of watched this, and you see this happening in large parts of Europe now. And so we need to wake up and certainly think about what's going on here in America, and be vigilant here, and be bold in our faith, and share the good news with all.
Yeah, man. It's funny. If you brought up Sharia law 20 years ago, people might roll their eyes at you, but it was really prophetic, because when you see what's happening in places like London, it's all coming true. I mean, London is pretty much a Muslim city now. It was once the capital of, the Christian British Empire, and now it's been totally conquered by mass migration. It was prophetic, and maybe as all prophetic things are, it was mocked at first. If you study the Bible, prophets were always mocked, and then their prophecies came true. We're running out of time here. I want to give you both. I mean, I'm struck by the importance of this issue, in some sense, my own, powerlessness to address it. But it sounds like there are things that are being done. We're waiting on the Trump administration to do certain very specific things. We can be praying. What is the final word? First, I'll go to you, Arielle, and then you, Congresswoman, to say, okay, what's the message to Americans on what can we do? How should we be thinking about this? How should we be praying as Christians who, we love our country, but we do have this familial tie to people overseas. And as was said, we're going to be worshiping in heaven with them one day. So what's the kind of the final word on this?
Yeah, I think firstly, we just should not be underestimating the importance of our prayers. Vice President J.D. Vance, you alluded to the recent coverage where people have been criticizing prayer as an action in the wake of tragedies. But Vice President J.D. Vance said, we pray because not only our hearts are broken, but we believe God is listening, right? We believe God is going to intervene here. And we've seen many cases. Our friend Andrew Brunson, who is an American pastor, was imprisoned in Turkey for 2 years. There was a prayer push around the world for him, and he was eventually released, also with actions from the Trump administration. But prayers matter, and they are also just really encourage the people who are persecuted. In those cases where they're actually able to know that people around the world are praying for them, it's deeply encouraging. So I do think we should be praying, but also we should just be talking about this as a discussion in our church, in our small groups. We can be praying for the persecuted church, but also we can just be mentioning it on social media. Our elected leaders are very responsive to what we are talking about, even online. And if they are hearing that we are talking about and caring about international religious freedom issues, that's going to trickle upwards, hopefully to political action. So there's a lot we can be doing, and certainly we should be starting with prayer.
Yes, I would concur with all of those things. And certainly the prayers of a righteous man are powerful and effective, the Bible says. And we just believe that we are called to pray for them. And so, yes, please do that. I heard a Chinese woman who had been in prison, a Christian, for many years. She was in solitary confinement, and she shared a very powerful testimony at our church once, how she felt so alone at one point in her imprisonment. And she just cried out to God. She goes, I'm all alone, and I feel so lonely. And she said that the Lord gave her a vision then where she saw people praying for her fervently, and she realized they were Americans. And she was so encouraged and blessed. Why would Americans be praying for me? But it made a difference in it, and it helped her endure her imprisonment. And you never know that maybe the Lord is enabling some other prisoner to hear your prayers as you are lifting them up. We don't know, but certainly we're called to do that. But I would encourage people to do action too. As you said earlier, Casey, we're called to visit prisoners and to give food and things. And there are organizations that we can do that through. And I won't name them, but there are some wonderful Christian organizations who are coming alongside our persecuted brothers and sisters, giving them tangible help, and they need support. So we can do that. Then also, when you contact your member of Congress and encourage them when they to speak up for someone like this, to adopt a prisoner of conscience through the Defending Freedoms Project, when they go on a congressional delegation, to research ahead of time or have their staff research, is there a person I can advocate for that's a person of faith in prison in this country? And sometimes when you're an American politician and you bring that up to the government official, Sam Brownback, who was a U.S. Senator, shared how he helped get a prisoner out just simply by mentioning his name and asking them to release them. So ask your member of Congress to do that and weigh in with the Trump administration and thank him for his past leadership and ask him to be just as bold and incorporate religious freedom in the negotiations of this administration as well. So those are some practical things we can do. We can make a difference. And I appreciate the opportunity to be on with you today and to talk about this topic. I must add that these are comments of my own and they're not official position of USERF, but I'm honored to work on behalf of people of faith around the world, Christians and others as well.
Wow. Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Well said. The prayer, the practical, it's got to go hand in hand. Our war is not against flesh and blood. It's, there's a lot going on in the spirit realm where God can move the hearts of leaders in an instant, and for reasons we don't understand, that years of lobbying can't do, but at the same time, he works through natural means. And that's what you guys are doing. And so I'm just honored to be a part of this conversation. It's such a big topic. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for listening to our listeners. Of course, the Outstanding Podcast, we come out every week. Please like, subscribe, share with people you think would be interested in this, post it on social media. The algorithm's not our friend always, as I always say, because we talk about issues that can be offensive but are really important. And we have that biblical perspective, which sadly is often shut down or shadow banned or and all that. And we've definitely experienced that on YouTube already. So please share. Vicky, Arielle, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Casey.
Good to be with you.
Outstanding is a production of The Washington Stand, your source for news and commentary from a biblical worldview. This podcast is made in the USA by producer Casey Harper, production assistant Rachel Woods, technical producers David Salkeld and Yusuf Fletcher, and executive producer Jared Bridges. Help support us by texting the word OUTSTANDING to 67742 and read more at WashingtonStand.com.